I still think there is some false understanding of what a virtual learning environment is for both students and families. And we still get families who come to us and say, well, during COVID, we had online learning. I know what that's like. Well, no, you really don't. So, we have those conversations. Well, that was that. And
Right.
this is going to look very different. So understanding what the expectation is, because yes, it is a flexible learning environment, but that doesn't mean you have the entire semester to do all of your schoolwork and you turn everything on the last day and, you get to remain enrolled and you get your grade. It's not like that. And especially in special education where we've got service minutes that have to be provided and there
Right.
are related services that have to be provided. It's not as flexible as I think people come in thinking it will be. We can do all of our schoolwork on one day a week. Maybe, but is that really benefiting your student?
Right.
So I think just battling those misconceptions is probably still our biggest challenge.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Brighter Together podcast. My name is Janet Courtney, and my special guest today is Jennifer Geyer. Jennifer is the Director of Special Education, and that she is at Great River Connections Academy. And before we went on air, we discovered she remembered me from when I worked at Connections Academy in Ohio. So, Jennifer, so excited to have you on the show.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
So tell everybody a little bit about your journey and a little bit about Great River.
Gosh, my journey. Okay. So this is my 20th year in special education. My career started out in a, pretty typical brick and mortar school here outside of Central Ohio. After 3 years, I was told that I was moving to a different school and I was going to be doing different things. And I was like, well, I don't really love that. So I started looking and I
Right.
found Ohio Connections Academy. So I started working as an intervention specialist. I was there for 7 years, working with a variety of students and ability levels. After 7 years, I was promoted to the assistant manager of special education, and I was there for 2 years in that capacity. And then in 2018, Great River Connections Academy opened. So I came over here and helped start GRCA in 2018, and I've been here since.
Awesome. So when you say 17 years, I want our audience to really understand virtual education. Virtual is not new. I mean, you're talking 17, 20, 25 years ago. And so we're talking 2000. So way before the pandemic, this was already happening, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And so one of the things I said because of course we started in 2018, 2 years before the pandemic, and I'm like, God knew what he was doing. It was like to help. We really wanted to help, really. And there were schools that listened and schools that didn't. And, and I was like, I remember being in this forum with superintendents, and I was like, guys, there are superintendents that have been doing virtual for over 20 years. And the next forum that they had a superintendent at a virtual school. And I was like, it's already being done.
Yeah.
And so what was your, I know we really weren't going to go there, but what is a little bit, just give people a little bit about what that time was like for you guys.
Oh, goodness. It was kind of interesting because really the only thing that changed for us was our enrollment definitely increased, but it really was no big hiccup in our day-to-day because we were already doing it.
Right.
So there was no floundering around trying to find lessons and, how do we deliver this service? It was just another day in our virtual world, with the caveat that now all of our children were also home and our spouses were home and things like that. So we all, of course, had to deal with those types of stressors, and the enrollment changes that we experienced, kids who, a variety of situations where the district they lived in just wasn't, no district was prepared for COVID.
No,
there was just no preparation for that. But some districts, I think, managed maybe a little bit better than others. And families were just not happy with what they were getting. So they came to us, and some stayed. Some have been with us, and they just realized this is really just a better setting and better fit for my family and my student. And then there were others who were like, yeah, no, as soon as those doors open, we are back in that school building. So,
and that's the beauty.
We saw that. and books
Right.
too.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of education is like you can do brick and mortar and have kids thrive, absolutely
Yeah,
thrive.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we homeschooled for a part of our year. Part of our children's academic career started out in public school, and then did homeschool for several years, and then they all eventually, for whatever part of their high school, went back to public school based on what my children's needs were,
Mhm.
not based on what I wanted them to have. But I mean, obviously I'm their mother, but it was really about, and that's the beauty of it, of education. And the shift that I'm seeing in education is child centered, education based on the needs of that child, as special ed has been all along. We're really seeing, let's tailor the education to each child's needs and their likes and their interests and whatever. And so, we and part of that career for my kids was Connections Academy. That's why I was
Mhm.
connected with Connections Academy, was we tried that and did that for a couple of years. So, it was my kids got a very eclectic education, but it was what worked for them. And so having the opportunity and having parents have an opportunity, and I say, there's lots of bad about COVID, but I think that was one thing where there were children that were not thriving in public school that went to virtual school, took all of those stressors of being around all those other kids, and maybe the bullying was happening or whatever it was. And all of a sudden you went from a failing kid to an A student because they were able to focus on their academics. And it didn't, I mean, there's lots of arguments around, but it's incredible, really.
Yeah, setting matters. I mean,
Yeah,
educational setting matters, absolutely.
absolutely. So Great River started, I know you said, but tell me again, when did Great River start?
2018.
2018. So you had a couple of years already under your belt for that one.
Yeah.
Why did they open Great River versus just Ohio Connections Academy?
So I think OCA had grown to the capacity that they wanted to at that point because there was another larger e-school in Ohio that had closed a few years prior to that. So they had seen a major influx in students. And there was still a need. There were
Okay.
still families who were looking for online schools. They liked Connections Academy because of the history and, they had a very good reputation in the state. And, Pearson, our parent company, saw a need for opening another school. So our school leader is actually from Ohio Connections Academy. Um, I came from Ohio Connections Academy. One of our other school leaders, and two of our school leaders actually, have other experiences from Ohio Connections Academy. So we have that that foundational understanding of what it takes to get started with a new school.
And how do you attract students? Like if you're already got Ohio Connections Academy, what did they do to increase enrollment? Obviously enrollment's not been an issue because you're growing like
No,
crazy, but
yeah.
how did they manage that then?
So, OCA put some enrollment caps in place for their
Ah,
own schools. So then it
okay.
became not necessarily we were just overflow,
Mhm.
but the way that it was marketed and what marketed at that time was this is a new school, very small classes, very individualized attention because the classes are smaller. So we attracted some students that way and families, and then they've just been coming back.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. And so now you've got, wow, almost 8 years under your belt, right? Fantastic. So what are some of your biggest challenges then, would you say?
Oh, I still think there is some false understanding of what a virtual learning environment is for both students and families. And we still get families who come to us and say, well, during COVID, we had online learning. I know what
Mhm.
that's like. Well, no, you really don't. So, we have those conversations. Well, that was that, and
Right.
this is going to look very different. So, understanding what the expectation is, because yes, it is a flexible learning environment, but that doesn't mean you have the entire semester to do all of your schoolwork and you turn everything on the last day and, get to remain enrolled and you get your grade. It's not like that. And especially in special education where we've got service minutes that have to be provided and there
Right.
are related services that have to be provided. It's not as flexible as I think people come in thinking it will be. We can do all of our schoolwork on one day a week. Mm,
Mm,
maybe, but is that really benefiting your student?
right.
So I think just battling those misconceptions is probably still our biggest challenge.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And then, with special education, then what does an IEP, I mean, I know the answer to this question, but I want you to answer it for me. But how does an IEP look different in a virtual setting versus maybe what a family or a school would experience in a brick and mortar or charter school that's not virtual?
So, really not a lot of differences other than the way that the services are provided. You're not, sitting one-on-one all the time with an intervention specialist in a resource room necessarily or in a small group with with an intervention specialist. There are small group interventions provided on a weekly basis, multiple times a week in most cases. There are still one-on-one services provided. So, the way the services are provided and maybe those service minutes might look a little different in our virtual setting just because of the different schedules.
And the kids still go to regular classroom classes as well?
Yes, all except our alternatively assessed students, their courses look a little bit different. So they have access to the standard courses. They still have access to go to the live lessons with their peers. But the majority of their education happens a little more in a more restricted setting.
Right, right. Yeah. So, what would you tell somebody is the biggest strengths that come with doing a virtual school?
Gosh, there are a few. I think for the families who are committed to making this work and understanding that it isn't just a commitment on the student side, it's really a family
Mhm.
commitment,
Absolutely.
especially for those younger kids who need to have that support at home. They really get to see their student blossom. The things that were struggling in the brick and mortar setting, whatever those things were, if it's the social aspect of it, seeing some of those walls come down and letting them enjoy school. I
Mhm.
think that we see that a lot.
Yeah.
That happens a lot in our IEP meetings. Families say, I wish I would have done this sooner. I didn't
Mhm.
realize what a positive experience this would be. We have kids who aren't qualifying for special education anymore because, you know, they've gotten what they need. We removed all those extraneous things that were standing in their way at school and they're thriving. Um, so I think just the first seat, that first row experience for the parents to see exactly what their students are doing on a daily basis, is huge for a lot of families.
Well, and this is something that when I first started doing virtual schools was intimidating to me because I'd only done brick and mortar, but you have access to the parents. I know you guys call it a learning coach, which typically is a parent, but not always.
Mhm.
But they're there. They're right there. And that was something as a therapist, I went, yes, once I figured it out. I'm like, instead of
Right.
being intimidated, I was like, this is the person that's teaching this child the most. And this is the
Mhm.
person I need to follow that needs to follow up with whatever strategies or whatever we're working on so that they can generalize it into
Right.
their everyday speech. I'm a speech
Absolutely.
therapist, but yeah. And so explain to somebody who like maybe has a misconception that their child is going to sit in front of the computer for 8 hours a day and sit there all day long and listen to instruction and that's going to be what school's going to be look like. Can you give us an idea of what a typical day for maybe an elementary school
Mhm.
and then maybe a middle school, high school kid?
Sure. So elementary school, our live lessons, what we call live lessons, that's the synchronous, learning that the student does right with the teacher in, we call it live lesson. Our platform is class. So it's a setting, through Zoom.
Mhm.
Their first live lesson of the day maybe starts at 9 o'clock. So we encourage students, maybe there needs to be some consistency. There has to be some sort of schedule that they're following. So maybe they're getting up at 8:30 and they're eating some breakfast and they're getting ready for the day. And, they're going to their first live lesson, which for an elementary student is probably between 30 and 45 minutes, focusing on either language arts, math, science, social studies, whatever the content is. Then there's usually a little bit of a gap between the next live lesson. So maybe they're going to go ahead and start their daily classwork, which when they log into our system, everything they need to do for that day is right there on their planner. It's a click of a mouse and they're right into
Mhm.
their lessons.
Mhm.
So maybe
Awesome.
they get a lesson done and then maybe it's time for another live lesson a little bit later in the day. So usually, 2 to 3 live lessons a day, and I would say that's usually a busier day.
Yeah.
But then, the requirement per the state is a student has to have 27 and a half hours of online time per week. Well, our schedule is Sunday to Saturday. So, if a family says, okay, we're going to do all the live lessons on our planner for the week, but we're going to save some of these bigger assignments for the weekend when maybe mom or dad or somebody is available to sit with them, they have access to do that. And that time is tracked in our system. So it all counts towards attendance time.
Mm-hmm.
So really they can tailor their daily schedule around the live lesson schedule. If they want to do all of their schoolwork after, 4 o'clock, after mom or dad is home, or somebody is more available, they have the flexibility to do that. But the live lessons are still in the planner for them to engage with um, for their time with their teachers and peers.
So what
And I
happens
would
if
say
it
middle school looks
Go
very
ahead.
similar to
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, and, high school also, there are more classes, obviously, so more live lessons for high school, but all of our live lessons are recorded,
I
for
was
the
just gonna go
teachers,
there.
the recordings is what you were going to ask
Yeah.
about. So the students, even if they can't attend, or if they're in the middle of a project, they really just want to power through and get it done,
Mm-hmm.
they can go back and watch that recording anytime.
There's a big difference between being supported by somebody who's walked in your shoes and someone who hasn't. At Lighthouse Therapy, our leadership team is made up of experienced clinicians who've actually worked in schools. We understand the pressure you're under and what real support looks like. That's why our therapy solutions, whether it be virtual, hybrid, or in person, are built with you in mind. No complicated systems or red tape, just streamlined support and seasoned therapists who are ready to make a difference. Learn more at lighthouse-therapy.com/brighter together.
Yeah, which is fantastic because even, the one thing that you're missing when you have that is the interaction. You don't get the direct interaction, but you can get the content. You can go back
Absolutely,
and
yeah.
listen. Johnny was sick, he
Mhm.
woke up and he was puking and,
Mhm.
just could not do school that day. Well, he doesn't miss that day of school.
Right.
He just goes in after when he's feeling better and does it then. I'll
Mhm.
tell you, one of the things that blew me away as a teletherapist was how much the kids really wanted to come to therapy. Now, part of that is just, a good therapist is going to grab them and want them to be there. It doesn't matter if you're in a brick and mortar or virtual, whatever,
Mhm.
because virtual is a modality. It's a modality. It's
Yes.
education is education is education, right?
vehicle.
Speech is the same
Yeah.
way. Yeah, it's a vehicle to it. And what I actually had one child, his dad logged him on, and I think this was when I was at Connections Academy, from the ER. He fell
Oh.
down, hurt his wrist, and was waiting in the ER for the doctor to come, and it was his time for speech, and he was, like, crying to his dad, "I don't wanna miss speech."
That is dedication.
And I said, "Oh, honey, let's read a book. We'll read a book until the doctor comes." We didn't do therapy. But it was so sweet because he just this child did not
Mhm.
want to miss his speech. And he loved, that was like, that warmed my heart. I
Yeah.
think I've told that story 20 times, but it was just,
Yeah,
it was so
people think
sweet.
you can't make connections with students. How do you really get to know the students when you're online?
Yeah.
The families open up to us in a different way than they
Mhm.
do
Mhm.
to, a teacher when you're sitting at a parent-teacher conference, which can be a little intimidating for families. But,
Mhm.
when you kind of give a little bit of space, it is sometimes heartbreaking, the things that are shared with us, and it's very clear why these families have chosen to come here. Some of the experiences these kids have had, I
Yeah.
can't even wrap my head around some of the things these kids have gone through.
But what a blessing it is that they have that option, right?
Yeah,
That
absolutely.
we live. I don't know what God has placed on my heart lately, but I live in 2026. This is February 10th. We're 4 days from Valentine's Day. My God, Valentine's nails even, but 4 days from Valentine's Day. But 2026 is um, I think it's a year of innovation, a year of change. We've seen AI come in and all of these different things, but even medical stuff and just there are things that we have today, and online education is definitely more and more and more becoming a part of that. That wasn't there. It just wasn't an option. You go back 30 years ago, wouldn't
Yeah.
have even I'm in a therapist since I've been a therapist for 32, almost 32 years now. Oh Oh gosh, I hate it when I say that. I've been saying 31 and I realized, oh no, it's 32 next month. Doggone
Time
it.
creeps up.
It does creep up on us, doesn't it? But 32 years ago in 1994, when I started doing therapy, this was not even something that I would have even considered doing. And here we are. You and I
Mhm.
are having this conversation and doing a podcast
Right. Yeah.
virtually, right? You're in Ohio, I'm
Mhm.
in South Texas, and the kids are. It just blows me away how much in those 30 years things have changed, and how
Mhm.
how incredibly blessed we are to live in this time, you know?
Yeah, it's crazy, even just to think since GRCA opened, how the technology just within our platform has changed in the
Mm.
last few years. I mean, I mean, it's been wild to see the growth that has changed just within our system. So I'm really excited to see what's going to happen in the next few years where
Mhm.
we've already got these live tutors within our lessons where it's like a chat bot that pops up. I see your stuff. You've been sitting on this lesson for a while. Can I help you with something?
Right.
It's interactive now.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah, and, people are afraid of that, some of that,
Yeah.
and, talk about that just a little bit about why people should not be afraid of that. Why is technology so, from your perspective? Because
Hmm.
I'm excited about it. I'm sitting here
Sure.
going, "Yay, I love it!" But understanding why you shouldn't be afraid of it, and I mean, instruction is still a person. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah. That will never go away.
hmm
There's still going to have to be a human element to education, especially even in a virtual setting, because there are just too many things, too many individualized things that have to take place for students' needs to be met that AI is not going to be able to capture. The relationships with the students, their individual needs in the moment, those
hmm
specific moments when you go
decisions.
into a
Hmm.
one-on-one session with a student and you can tell by the look on their face, today is not the day where we're going to be talking about math.
Right.
Something else is happening and we need to address that first.
hmm
That is the human element of education that I don't think can ever be replaced.
No, and it shouldn't be. I was listening to a book. I love audiobooks. That's one of the things I do in the evenings. I crochet and I do audiobooks because it's downtime for me. And for the first time I did a virtual audiobook where AI had read the book. And it
Ooh.
was like $3 for this book. I'm on Audible, but I was like, ooh, out of curiosity, I just want to see what it's like. The prosody is missing. There is errors in prosody. It was really
Mm.
interesting as an SLP to listen to it and go, most of it was really good. It was like really, it was engaging. The story was good. I enjoyed the
Mhm.
story, but there were times, multiple times throughout the book where I was like, oh, that is so not how you say that, and the pauses and the commas and
Yeah,
we're not in the right places, and it's like I can figure that out as an SLP
as an
going, oh,
adult,
that's,
yeah.
and as an adult, yeah, absolutely, but that is not something that a child who is learning will be able to
No,
make that distinction. So understand, that's a piece of it that is really important to understand, that we have to, it's great, it's a great tool, it's a tool like anything else, it's
it
a
is.
tool.
It is a tool,
Yeah.
yes. And it's interesting, just my own son is 14 and a freshman in high school and is very passionate about physics and very much wants to pursue a career in physics. But, we're having to have conversations with him already, like, well, you need to look ahead to figure out what careers in your interest are really going to be available to you because
Mhm.
science, all these things are just being I don't want to say taken over. Nothing's really being taken over, but sometimes that human element is kind of being removed from certain careers. So we're trying
Yeah.
to encourage him to do his research and trying to help him along the way to make sure he's not pursuing a career that won't be available in 10
Right.
years.
Right.
So,
Right.
it's a lot to think about.
Yeah, and certainly in the tech world, I know that they're feeling
Yeah.
that as well. I've heard
Yeah.
lots of stories from tech people, and I have tech people, and we're even looking at, from our perspective of, the first level, we have live tech support right now for
Hmm.
us, and that first tier is eventually going to go to a bot.
Yeah.
It makes much more sense to have a bot do that. That will free up them so that they can learn
Right.
and adapt to the technology so we can incorporate it even more. That's a big switch. I never thought I would
Yeah.
do that. And two of the three people in our tech department, one is my husband, who's our
Mhm.
CTO, who is like chasing after this as fast as we can because it seems like it's changing every time we turn around. And then the other one is my son, who has been with me since day one,
Mhm.
with Lighthouse, and has been doing live tech support for almost 8 years now. So I'm like, and I was talking to him about it the other day, and I'm like, honey, it's gonna change your job. And he's not a kid and he's not a kid, he's 26. But I said, it's not. Your job's going to change. There just is not. It is not going to stay the same. The world is not going to stay the same.
Right.
And he's my neurodivergent kid. He doesn't want change. He doesn't. It's like, so
Mhm.
I'm trying to get him to the place where it's like, understand that this is something that's coming, whether you like it or not. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about
Wow.
adapting, you know?
Yes.
We
Yes.
have to be flexible.
Be flexible. Yeah, be flexible.
Yeah.
And I would say that to any school. Any school, you've got to, you got to have some. I've had some schools who have said, we don't want any AI at all. And it's like, okay, well, we'll respect that for today. But
Yeah. That's so funny we're having this conversation because our leadership team was just, I mean, not 10 minutes before we started this conversation, putting out more guidance for our teachers because we're finding kids who are, of course, using AI for the things they shouldn't be using it for and
mhm,
how we need
mhm,
to address that, how we're communicating it with families, and trying to be not accusatory, but helping them learn.
mhm,
When you use this, you're actually hurting yourself. You're not getting that repetition of the material that you need to make this a concrete
right.
concept for
Skill.
you.
Yeah.
And
Mhm,
explaining to the parents who are also new to all of this, how I don't understand what you mean. You put it into Chat GPT and got an answer. What does that even mean? So we're educating students, we're educating teachers, we're educating families on how all of this works and to trying to stay on top of it as much as we can and trying to encourage respectful and appropriate use of it because it's not going anywhere. So
mhm,
we
mhm.
might as well figure out how to embrace it and use it the right way and, use it. The teachers are using it. They're cutting planning time in half because, you don't have to go through and modify everything. You can drop it into a tool and it gives you something that is, at a different reading level or, something like that. So
And it
there are
and it
definitely uses for it.
And it can be HIPAA compliant, and it can be FERPA
Hmm.
compliant. Our
Yes.
what we're testing right now is definitely it's so important. It's such an important piece of it, the HIPAA and the FERPA compliance. So, when they came to me, they're like, the first thing they said to me was, "It's HIPAA and FERPA compliant." I was like, "Okay, okay, that's because it's got to be." It's just
Yeah, absolutely.
it's because you can't just put student data out there
No.
and
Right.
into the whatever and
Right.
say, "Oh, I'm complaining." No, you gotta. So
No.
yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know this was where this conversation was going to go, Jennifer. I really
Me neither,
didn't.
but that's okay.
It's okay. Yeah. So, what would you say if there was one thing, and one thing that you could just fix, like never have to worry about it
Mm.
in your world, in your sphere of things that you deal with? Can't be money. Can't be money. Can't be money. But if there was one thing, yeah, I know. Never, yeah, everybody needs more money, right? We all need more money. But what would you say is that one thing? Like, if you could, like, make the world a better place for these kids because they never had to, or you had never had this problem ever again, what would that be?
Gosh. This is so hard because I feel like there are so many kids who, if they had the proper support at home, would
Mhm.
thrive here.
Mhm.
So if I could take a handful of my, top tier learning coaches and caretakers and just clone them for every family, I think we
Mhm.
would see so much more success and the possibilities here. I think the possibilities would be endless for the kids to be successful. I think there's just unfortunately a misunderstanding of what is necessary on the parent end for
Mhm.
students who are enrolled here.
Yeah.
It's
And that
unfortunate.
and that's it. That's the whole point of that question, where's your heart? It really gets at where's your heart. And your heart is the kids, and that's very clear. We love the kids. That's why we do what we do, right? We're here
Yes.
because we want to take care of those kids because they're the future. And the
Mhm.
world is brighter together because we're here trying to do it
Yeah.
together. So, well, where, Jennifer, do people go if they want to learn a little bit more about Great River and maybe about the special education services that you guys provide there?
Yeah, you can go directly to our website, greatriverconnectionsacademy.com.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, it has been an absolute pleasure to have
Thank
you
you.
on the show. We went through 28 minutes and nothing flat. So,
No.
so thank you so much for being
Thank
here.
you.
I really appreciate you and your time and your passion and your consistency. I love that. And the fact that you remembered me, I appreciate that too. So thanks so much.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thanks again.
Absolutely.